Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Have 11 o'clock at the hour. Thank you so much for joining Data Plus Diversity, celebrating W.E.B. Du Bois through data visualization. We really appreciate you taking time out today. We're going to give a few more minutes for everybody to join and see some good questions already in the chat. And if you have questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A feature as well. One question from Robin: is this going to be recorded? Yes, will be recorded and it will be posted as well. So feel free to share this once it is uploaded to everybody that you know. We want them to participate and understand the historical components of W.E.B. Du Bois. We'll wait just a couple more minutes and then get started. Definitely want to be mindful of everyone's time today as well.
I just posted the deck in the chat for those who want to follow along. For my portion, anyway.
And then, as Allen mentioned in the chat, let us know where you're coming from. Let us know where you're at. Put it in the comments. We love to see the variety of people and where you're located. This is great to see where people from all over. We have some from UK. We got some people from Harlem. This is fantastic. Minnesota, New York. Wow, we got a really good coverage. This is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's someone from Tanzania.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time out. And as we mentioned earlier, this will be recorded. So once this is posted and uploaded, please share it with your friends, your colleagues, your friends, anybody else that you want to share it with, enemies, anybody. Feel free to share with everybody that you know. But we'll go ahead and hop into this. Today, we'll be talking about Data Plus Diversity, where we're celebrating W.E.B. Du Bois through data visualization. Just a couple things on the agenda. So we'll go through quick introductions. Then we'll pass it to Anthony Starks to talk about the life and data portraits of W.E. Du Bois. Pass it to Chimdi to talk about W.E.B. Du Bois via Spotlight using Tableau. Then we'll have a panel discussion to discuss the Du Bois Challenge and with the leadership team. And then we're going through the Du Bois Challenge for 2024. So we want to show you how to actually participate, get involved, look at the data sets, recreate it, where you can access all that stuff so that this challenge really blows up and blooms. So here is just a quick introduction, a page picture of the five of us. We have Mr. Anthony Starks, Mr. Allen Hillery, Mr. Chimdi, Mr. Rashid, and Sekou Tyler, and we've come together to form your leadership team for the W.E.B. Du Bois, but none of this would be possible without Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois himself. He's the person that has motivated and inspired all of us to recreate and use his elements of data visualization for some of our current work. And the challenge is really just spotlighting some of the stuff that he has done and how can we use modern tools to basically continue on his legacy. So with that, I'll pass it to Anthony, who will go more into depth about Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois and talk a little bit about the challenge.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, good day, everyone. I'm pleased to talk to you about data diversity and celebrating Du Bois's real legacy of data visualization. Like most stories, we have to start with an origin story. This is a picture of Du Bois, who would come to be, a noted activist and social scientist and so forth. But this is a picture of him as a freshman at Fisk University in Nashville, where he came and he said this about his experience there. I can hardly realize they are my people, that this great assembly of youth and intelligence and representatives of a race which 20 years ago was in bondage. Think about that quote as we go forward. So let's go forward from 1883 to 1900. The guy on the left is Thomas J. Calloway, newspaperman and lawyer, who petitioned, the U.S. government to say, you know what, there's going to be an exhibition, a World's Fair in Paris in 1900, and we'd like the story of African Americans to be a part of that. And he commissioned and organized the view, what's going to be called the Exposition of the American Negro. And he reached out to his Fisk alumni, his buddy, W.E.B. Du Bois, who had done a lot of pioneering work in sociology and so forth, to really pull this exposition together. And he didn't do it by himself. He worked with alumni and students at Atlanta University, of which you see representatives here. Anytime I talk about this stuff, I really like people to see and to visualize the time and the place and the people who are actually working on this project. On the left, you'll see the Atlanta University debate team. On the right, you see women seated at the steps, nattily dressed, beautifully dressed, in 1900. So that leads us to Paris. The Exposition de Paris in 1900 was a global phenomenon. It was a way for the world to come together and to celebrate all of the works and all of the progress that had happened during that time. On the left, you see the poster for the exposition. In the middle, you'll see sort of a panoramic view of Paris at that time. On the right-hand side, you'll see tucked off in an out-of-the-way place at the exposition was what became known as the Exposition of the American Negro. And the visualizations that we're going to celebrate today were actually first presented here, along with collections of photographs and busts and so forth. By the way, all of the originals are available for view in the Library of Congress. But before we dig into that, I really love to give a historical context. What was going on around that time, 1900, 124 years ago? So let's go back 5 years. During the summer of 1895, in a Brooklyn park, there was a cotton plantation complete with 500 Black workers reenacting slavery. This show was called Black America. For 25 cents, you can go and see Black people cosplaying slavery. The next year, in 1896, the Supreme Court handed down the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling that upheld the constitutionality of racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. 1897 was an important year for Du Bois because he embarked upon a study that called the Philadelphia Negro. And it was described as an inquiry to extend it over a period of 15 months, sought to ascertain something of the geographical distribution of this race, their organizations, and above all, their relation to the million white citizens. A lot of the work that you'll see with charts and graphs and visualizations, actually, you can see that work reflected in 1897. In 1898, the next year, the duly elected government in Wilmington, North Carolina, was violently overthrown. The coup occurred after the state's white Southern Democrats conspired and led a mob of 2,000 white men to overthrow the legitimately elected fusionist government. They expelled opposition Black and white political leaders, destroyed property, and killed between 60 and 300 people. The next year, in 1899, 27 Georgians were lynched, including the horrific lynching of Sam Hose in April of that year. Du Bois will actually saw some of the souvenirs, if you will, Sam Hose's body parts displayed during that time. Between 1890 and 1900, Georgia averaged more than one mob killing per month. Black lives did not matter. Then that leads us to the Paris Exposition. So during that time, it was an opportunity to show the world the progress that Black people had made in America only 35 years after emancipation. When I look at this work, I think of sort of what was the intention? What did they want to do? They wanted to show that, yes, we're here. We're part of America. We're part of the lifeblood of America. This is how we're distributed. This is the money that we've earned. These are the businesses that we have. And this is who we are. And he also wanted to show, again, as I stated before, this is how far we've come. Again, 1900 was only 35 years after the end of the Civil War and emancipation. Again, I want to go back to the venue. Again, it was tucked away in an out-of-the-way place as part of the exposition. And I'd like to paste in my reproductions to sort of give you a view of what that might have looked like to a passersby going forward. You can see in many cases the bold colors and the size and the scope of the visualizations that were there. If you look carefully, sort of in that middle tier here, you can see the sort of posters were also planted there so that you could sort of page through them. I always like to talk about the size and the scale of the visuals. You know, today we tend to work in, small screens, if you will, but these were large poster size, 22 inches by 28 inches in size, so that people could really sort of experience the visuals. If you're unfamiliar with the visuals, he produced around 60 visuals, again, working with Atlanta University. And I've sort of broken it down into a taxonomy. About half were sort of bar charts, about 16% maps, 14% are what I call blocks, sort of abstract shapes. He used a circular theme in many of them, and then about 5.5% were graphs. So let's just sort of flow through them quickly here. What you see here are reproductions of my reproductions of the visuals. So just sort of a step back in 2019, I took it upon myself to reproduce all of them as faithfully as I could to the originals. And what you see here are representations of those. So here are all the various forms of bar graphs. You can see lots of different variations. Some of them are very familiar to you. You can see this one is talking about the state of Georgia, and the shape of the data is in that shape as well. That one's kind of interesting. Maps were also very interesting as part of this work. So the very first sort of chart in there was talking about depicting the Middle Passage of the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to North and South America. Many maps of Georgia and the United States showing the distribution. There is kind of a circular theme in many of these things. One thing that I want to point out to the visuals that's so fascinating is you've got your conventional things like your bar charts and those kinds of, and maps. But some of these are just completely made up, for the time. Again, these were built, these are not things that you can just click on Tableau or Excel and generate. These were bespoke things that sort of wanted to give a little bit of verve and a little bit of color. There's the famous spiral there you see on the left. My favorite, the fan chart, which you see behind me as well. So that's the circular themes. Many cases you've got what are called blocks, where you use sort of these large blocks of color to represent the information. The one on the left that you see there where it's talking about slavery. And one thing that you'll notice there, if you can sort of zoom in, you can see it's many of the visuals are bilingual. They're in French and English, given that this was in Paris. So you'll see, again, the use of blocks there as well. Only a small amount are sort of the traditional line graphs, if you will. It's interesting to sort of look through the color palette that Du Bois used. These were, again, hand-drawn and hand-painted with watercolors. And this is the color palette that you can see used throughout. This is the book here, W.E.B. Du Bois's Data Portraits Visualizing Black America, that sort of started the journey for me. I went to a meetup where they were discussing this book, and I saw the visuals there and was just completely taken aback. I was aware of Du Bois, but I was not aware of his role in data visualization, and set it upon myself to recreate them. Here's sort of the visuals that you can see here in the book. As you open the book, this is what you see. So, just like Callaway and Du Bois in 1900, we have these two gentlemen, Allen and Sekou, who came to me in 2021 and said, you know what, we should do something called the Du Bois Challenge, where we challenge, the visualization community to recreate them, just like you had done a couple of years prior. And thus began the Du Bois Challenge. And we've been doing it since 2021, and we're here to talk about it today. So before we get there, I just want to take a step back and think about sort of the context. In 1900, they used pen and ink and watercolor, and they used the expo as a way to sort of get the word out. Today, we can use scripting and digital fonts and PDFs and the internet and venues like this to get the word out today. In effect, we have what we call a modern megaphone. You can take your message and amplify it to a larger spot using things like Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and Zoom and Mastodon and LinkedIn and Slack. So this leads us to the Du Bois Challenge for 2024. This is the first sort of public unveiling of what we're going to be talking about. So if you recall the color palette, you use the colors red, black, and green, which are also the Pan-African colors. Those weren't established until 1920. So, 20 years before, Du Bois used them amongst other colors. So we decided to use those same themes for the Du Bois Challenge for 2024. So for the first 3 weeks, we're going to talk about visualizations where the predominant color is red. For the next 3 weeks after that, black. And the next 3 weeks after that, green. And then finally, for the 10th week, the Du Bois Challenge runs for 10 weeks. We're going to have one that's a combination. You can see there in the URL is the GitHub link for the challenge, its rules, if you will, as well as all of the data sets for the community to come and reproduce those. Thanks a lot. Any questions? I'll pause here. Okay. Let me open the chat just to see if there's any questions. Okay. Sekou, thanks for posting that. Okay. All right.
Anthony,
Great.
when are we officially starting?
I'm sorry. We're starting a week from today, February 5th, and we'll go for 10 consecutive weeks. Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to kick it off into Chimdi, who will talk about his journey in using Tableau for doing the challenge. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. And hey, everyone. It's great to be here. I don't know if you can see me. I think my camera is blank, but hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'll try to make this work. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. And please let me know when you're able to see. Can you see?
Yes.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. So my name is Chimdi, and I'm part of the DuBois leadership team. And today, my goal here is to share sort of what's been going on with DuBois and Tableau, a little bit of where we've come so far, and then just kind of tie that in back to where we are today. So for an agenda, I'm gonna go through kind of the inspiration of where things all started. And then I'm going to go and sort of quickly show the DuBois Gallery, which is, I think a really big piece of what we've done with DuBois Challenge in Tableau. I'm going to go through some of the outcomes and impact of, the things that we've been doing. We're going to go through, I guess, what comes next, going through with, where we are and where we want to go. So, as far as inspiration goes, the first time I had my interaction with, the DuBois Challenge was in 2022. And it kind of started as an opportunity to just participate in the challenge, but it really expanded into more of a exploration of DuBois, his legacy, and just really getting to admire a lot of the work that he had done with telling the historical story, of Black people in the 1900s. Kind of like where Anthony had mentioned the 1900 Paris expedition. That's sort of where a lot of, the works were shown. And so similarly to that expedition, we had this exhibit, which I kind of encountered in 2022 at GS Week at North Carolina State University, right? And so, kind of seeing their work here and also seeing the gallery at the expedition that was done, I sort of had this idea to kind of go through and in the process of participating with the DuBois Challenge, I basically kind of ended up creating this gallery, which I'm going to show. I think a lot of people have seen it before, and it's really just a way to sort of get really your hands dirty with visualization and recreating the works of Tableau, kind of what we do with the challenge, but it just kind of took things a step further. Of course, Black History Month is something that comes every year. And as part of that celebration, we kind of go through these challenges to kind of recreate. And the whole goal is really just to kind of get people looking at, the different aspects of DuBois. I mean, he's got the visuals, he's got the mathematics, and there's the history. So, that was really a big inspiration and it just kind of drew me in. And of course, the database curiosity aspect of things, because like I mentioned, DuBois has a really striking style visually. And so even just from an admiration standpoint, it's really nice to look at. But then when you now take that and you try to partake in the challenge with of recreating what he's done, you really get a different appreciation for what he's done. And so I think that just in itself kind of creates a different kind of inspiration and it just pushes you to continue to dig and move on. And so with the gallery, which I had spoken about, it was birthed from the challenge. And so I'm just going to quickly show for those who haven't seen what it is. This is essentially what it looks like. Can you see the gallery on my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome, perfect. So it's a gallery style similar to what I saw over here at North Carolina State University, where it's just like an interactive view of some of his different portraits. You can kind of see a little bit here. Mine is just more essentially taking the visuals from the 2022 challenge and then adding in, I believe it was 10 more that I just sort of selected from the Bois palette. So we have this first page here. You go to the next page and then you can kind of see a little bit more here. And the whole idea is that you can essentially click into the images and it takes you to the image in the gallery. And then here you're able to see a Tableau recreation of the original work. And then you can click here, view inspiration, and this shows you the original work. So you can kind of go back and forth and just sort of see, what are the similarities, what are the differences. I think mine is acting up a little bit here, so try to ignore that. And then when you're done with the one, you can move on to the next one and the next one and the next one, and so on and so forth. So the goal is essentially just to sort of highlight some of these visuals, inspire you by showing the original and just give you an opportunity to kind of go through the different ways in which these might have been recreated in Tableau. The workbook is fully downloadable. That's one of the most important things, the learning aspect. So, we at its core, this is a Tableau user group. And so the whole thing is to learn Tableau. So I like the fact of just being able to put work out there for anyone who has an interest. They can go in, they can explore. And this gallery, I find, is one of those pieces that really helps with that because there's different techniques that have been utilized, different tips, different tricks. And so for a person who really wanted to get their hands dirty by doing, this is one of those things where you can say, okay, let's grab this workbook. Let's try to recreate a bunch of these charts. And then for those where you might reach stumbling blocks, then you can kind of dig in and say, okay, what was utilized in this particular way? So that's kind of what, I think is really great about this. There's just a lot of value in here. And of course, just the process of going through and making it. For me personally, the educational aspect from learning about DuBois and what he was trying to communicate through his work. And then, just the fact of being able to complete that for me was really big. And so that's just the gallery. I want to talk a bit about the impact, right? So from a community perspective, that gallery that I did, I was really grateful. It was really well received by the community. A lot of people really got excited about the DuBois challenge, and it really helped with engagement. Another thing from a community perspective is that same year, the Viz won favorite Viz of the year. That was like really crazy for me because I really remember, just sitting in my seat. I was working at the time. They made the announcements. I kind of heard my name, and that was like, really important to me because the DuBois challenge really, from how I was impacted based on my exploration of that historical aspect of things, just to kind of see the way it was all received based on what it meant to me, I was really grateful to the community for that. And then from a broader impact perspective, this is one of the areas that we never really got to highlight last year, but I got contacted by a lady, from Martin Luther King Jr. School in Berkeley, California. And she explained how some of the stuff that they had seen about the DuBois challenge and the work that we had done had inspired them to actually go on this whole DataVis project, which I'm going to show a bit of the photos in a few moments here. But what was really striking about this to me was, I got to sit in with some of these kids in the class. And at grade 5, the level of thought that they had towards what they had seen with some of the portraits and, just the thinking that it generated, I was really impressed by that. And I think that's one of the really important things about DataVis is like, you are just starting different conversations in different areas. You're communicating about different subjects and you're basically enlightening people, right? So the format which they did it in was essentially they shared some of the DuBois stuff, the visuals, And they had the kids essentially reflect on different things. What do you notice about the visuals just from looking at it? They asked them to kind of just share their thoughts on what ways they thought the visualizations were innovative and cool. And then, things start to get a little bit serious where they're having to also reflect on, what insights they're finding about Black history, the condition back in the 1900s when this work was being done. And then it then asks them to sort of think about what does that mean to them and what kind of thoughts it generates for them. And so, in going through this, essentially, the kids they went through the exercises, and then the culmination was at the end where they sort of created their own database projects, some of which were inspired by the DuBois works. So you can kind of see here some of the projects. I think one that really jumps out, you can sort of see the DuBois spiral up here, and then some of the other things that kind of, really resemble some of what he's done. And then you have some more stuff over here. And so, to me, like this is just really what it's all about, right? Like these kids, they're in grade 5, their interest in data viz, statistics, data science is already peaked. And, they're able to encounter meaningful people like DuBois at such an early age, and it can kind of shape the way they see the world, the way they think about the world, and create awareness about certain things that they maybe may not have encountered if not for going through this process. So that was something that was really impactful there. And so, in terms of what's next for me, I'm going to be participating, of course, in the DuBois Challenge for this year in February. I'm going to continue to engage and spread awareness to the DataFam about DuBois as much as possible. One of the things that I had done previously was to put out some tutorials on creating some of the DuBois charts that were released in the challenge. The goal for that was to essentially give a little bit of an introduction to Tableau and creating some of the more simple visualizations just to get people sort of acquainted with the tool and engaged with the challenge and also exposed to DuBois. And so you can check out some of that stuff on my YouTube channel. And I aim for this year to add a few more related to this particular challenge. So I'll be recreating some of the charts, posting what I've done, and of course, going through some of the Tableau concepts in the process. And then what's next for you? I would say before the challenge, you want to definitely get yourself ready and primed. So follow the DuBois challenge on Twitter. That's where a lot of the posts are going to be originating from, and you get to see some of the highlights of what other people are posting, because it does highlight some of the cool stuff out there. You want to follow Allen, you want to follow Sekou, Anthony, and myself. Rashid, more than likely, you're not going to find them on Twitter, but you can check them out on LinkedIn as well. So that's the first thing you want to do. And then next, I would encourage you just kind of get primed with some DuBois content. So there's this article with the Data Visualization Society from Anthony Starks where he kind of talks about the challenge. I also have one where I go into more depth about the gallery that I built. This is some more content from some other data fan, Pearl Lundeen. She did a bit of a review of some of DuBois' work. Jason Forrest also, I believe he is or was with the Data Visualization Society. He's also got some more stuff. You can read into all of that and just kind of see, like different perspectives and just different, reviews on how people experience DuBois' works. And then if you're kind of looking specifically for challenge related stuff, we actually have a dashboard where we've tracked all our metrics for the challenge. So the cool thing here is you can get to see who has participated, where they are, and then you can actually get to check out the tweets. And so if you're looking for some type of inspiration from, how people have approached different things in the past, you can sort of leverage some of that and then utilize them for this year's challenge. Or you can just simply just keep a track of this dashboard, use it to track your own entries, because we are going to be updating this for this year as well. And I believe that is it from me. So if there's any thoughts, questions, please feel free to,
So one thing I do want to point out is we're not restricting ourselves just to Twitter/X. Again, last year we did LinkedIn, Mastodon, Instagram, as well as Twitter, and the Data Visualization Society Slack will also do it there as well. So again, talking about that modern megaphone, we're going to use a plethora of social platforms to get the word out and have people participate. One thing that I also want to say is, again, if you look at the GitHub link, you can read this, but we don't try to steer people in any particular tool or any particular method. You can go, a faithful representation, or you can just use it as an inspiration. We try to keep it very loose so that people can, make it their own and use, various techniques for doing that.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Chimdi. Next, we're going to do a panel discussion, but before doing that, Chimdi, I have a question for you. That takes so much skill, what you did in Tableau. So I'm going to hype you up on that just to show how great that was. But I'm really curious on what was the most difficult visualization to recreate in Tableau, and why was it difficult?
the most difficult one. Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, let me see. I'm just gonna take a quick peek at the gallery here. Okay, so difficult, I will say.
Can you share your screen?
Yes, I'm going to in a second. Okay, so this is, let me contextualize this, but I'll share my screen. Okay. Let me know when you can see the screen.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So I don't know that I would classify anyone as difficult per se, but in terms of putting it all together, thinking wise and effort wise, I think this was the one that I had to think through how would I put it all together. And so if you look at the original, this is what it looks like. And so there's pictures, there's text, there's a bunch of things here. And I didn't want to necessarily eliminate a bunch of stuff, even though I did. So I'd say this one took me a while to kind of think through what I wanted to do. And funny enough, there's actually someone else who, I believe Professor Klaus, he actually created this particular chart, including all these detailed lines and everything in Tableau, like in a single view. So he did a bunch of complicated stuff to create this. His is one that I say definitely, if we look at what he did, that is definitely complex. But for me, just thinking about how I wanted to, this is the one where I had to think for a while, how do I want to explain and replicate that in Tableau? Does that kind of help answer that question?
Oh, yeah. It answers it perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So this is what it looks like. There's bars here. This is an actual picture. This is actual text. This is actual boxes. And so, yeah, I think it came out well. But this would be the one. This would be the one.
Appreciate it. I know I put you on the spot a little bit, so thanks
No,
for
it's all
answering that question.
right.
All right.
Yeah, so Ted, let me jump in here for that one as well. Again, that's one of my favorites. It's on my wall as well. But it's interesting to look at that one because that one actually describes how people spend their money. Again, in 1900, this is one of the ones that I also recreated with modern data, and that's a theme that people tend to do with the challenge as well. They not just use the 1900 data, but they also replicate it with modern data. And it's very interesting to compare and contrast, how people are spending their money in 1900 versus today.
That would be interesting for sure.
Awesome. This is great stuff. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Chimdi. This is really fantastic. So let's go ahead and hop into the panel discussion part of today. We have Allen, Rashid, Chimdi, and Anthony on. And what we're going to do now is just ask a few questions. We've all been a part of the DuBois Challenge and part of leadership and seen this thing really start with just a seed of an idea, and now here we are, 2024, with content and links and portfolios and a big following all across all the world. So the first question that I want to ask today is, what impact has the DuBois Challenge had on you since you've been a part of the challenge?
I'll take a shot at that first. I mean, for me, I think it was a scenario where in which, I'm a big proponent, whether it's Tableau or any other BI tool, whatever tool that you have at your disposal, you can think beyond the default visualizations. It'll come with the ability to build bar charts and pie charts and all sorts of other things. But I mean, the thing about the DuBois Challenge that stood out to me is that these were visualizations that were created in 1900. So I can't say some BS like Tableau doesn't do that. I don't think I can do that in Tableau. Well, they did it in 1900, so I guess if I really kind of thought about it, it really shouldn't be an excuse. And that I kind of like the idea of that, where it's kind of like it isn't built to do it, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do it anyway. You really have to kind of think outside the box about how you're going to do it. And to me, that is a real good example of just how to get better, at any tool. Think of it in a way that necessarily, I like to think that I don't know if the person who's on the programming side, the actual developer of the tool, ever had this in mind, but I might still be able to pull it off with their tool anyway. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think, especially with the DuBois Challenge, kind of like to Anthony's point in that, you can use this to just necessarily recreate what was done, or you can use it with today's data and try to, put your own spin on it. But it forced me to kind of think of visualizations with a different lens, not the kind of standard lens that I think most of us, in addition to the importance of using, data visualizations to expose like, social injustices and stuff like that.
So I'll take that one too. So I'll piggyback a bit on that. When I was doing my recreations in 2019, I was also developing my own tools that I continue to use. And one of the impacts is the challenges that I would come up with to try to recreate them informed building the tools. And one of the impacts is, as we've been talking about before, is if your tool doesn't do what you need it to do, try to push it. The other thing is to think about the intention of your visuals. DuBois and Callaway and so forth had a very strong intention in 1900 to combat the view of Black people in America and to put it on a larger stage. At that time, one of the prevailing ideas was that Black people were inherently inferior. This was to prove with numbers and charts and graphs and so forth, that's not the case. And, again, one of the impacts is this was done 124 years ago, and they're still fresh, and we're still being challenged by the forms. It allowed me, for example, to create a tool to do fan charts, because you're not going to get that out of the box, but it can be programmed. And one of the, again, takeaways for me is the ability to use and create your own tools to do what you want. In their case, they used, poster board and watercolor, and today we're using digital tools. It's the same thing to be able to do that.
Allen, Chimdi, you got anything?
I mean, I'd say that on my side, one of the biggest things is the exposure to the actual information that's being shown in his work, right? And not to put myself out there like that, but before the DuBois Challenge, I'll be honest in saying that I didn't have too much of an exposure and or interest in a lot of the historical aspects of Black existence, right? Because I was so caught up in the today and how far we've come and like why do we still care about that stuff. But DuBois kind of allows you to see the experience, and it allows you to understand that these people, they are a part of, in a sense, our own history, the experience
Yeah.
that they went.
I mean, just to add to else?
I think
Sorry,
Alan's having a little
I
bit of
didn't catch
internet
that.
issues.
I didn't catch that yet.
Are you all able to hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now. We hear you better.
No, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to just add to all that I think one of the impacts that's had on me is that we great, DuBois, Sekou and I, we had the things I wanted to say, and also just being able to also said this was done over 100 years ago when it came to data visualization. So that's that on me.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, well, moving on to the next question. In what ways does DuBois' strategies in data visualization remain relevant in addressing contemporary social issues that are still happening to this very day?
So I'll start with that one. I think it's all very relevant. It's the lesson here is you can use visuals to tell a particular story to whatever audience that you need. And visuals are a very compelling way to get whatever message you want to have out there. So it's interesting that the exposition won many awards and so forth, but then it was kind of buried after that, and it was kind of disappointing to Du Bois that it didn't go further. So having the ability to again use the internet to magnify our voices is a key thing for me.
Yeah, I think I agree with Anthony. It's like, it highlights the importance of just, using ethical data, in ways that are, constantly more important than ever. It's the idea that you have access to all this data, and depending on the technique and the way that you visualize that data, it can be pretty profound. The impact that's had based on the story and the narrative that you're trying to tell. Sometimes when you see it in the visualization, it's a lot different in context than when it's just in a written word or spoken word.
Right.
And I'll actually jump in here and answer this one. So for me, I find myself being more aware of visualizations that's going out in the public when it comes to social issues and how that story is being painted. So understanding, Du Bois went to Paris and created something that was publicly facing, and he had a specific reason for call out different things. I look at things that are happening today and some of the data visualizations or some of the infographics or some of the particular things that go out and kind of spotlighting, who the audience is going for, whether it's good or bad or what type of biases are there or not there. And I think through this challenge, like I was able to see, how do you craft a really good story for an audience that is trying to consume this information, whether they care about it or not, but how do you still reel them in? And I think that's still happening very much today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I say on this side is just realizing that for each piece of data that's being visualized, there are people behind the data. And so that's something that always stuck with me is each time I'm now looking at data, I'm not just seeing numbers, I'm not just seeing statistics, I'm seeing experiences, I'm seeing lives, I'm seeing human beings. And that's something that I think, I really appreciate that because it makes you approach things in a different way completely.
Yeah, I like that point. Sort of one of the things that we've been talking about, in the past is how do you humanize the data? One of the things to note, if you go to the Library of Congress, which I put in there, not just the visuals were there, but a whole lot of photographs. And the plate that Chimdi showed with the expenditures, that one stood out because it wasn't just a chart, but it also included photographs and a facsimile of $1. So again, one of the lessons is don't be satisfied with the defaults that your tool gives you, break that up, go for it, and use whatever is required to get your message out.
Love that. And I think to add to both points of the humanize the data and then just the way to get the data, Anthony, keep me honest on this, but didn't he have to go kind of door by door or to actual people to collect the information?
So that was the Philadelphia Negro work in 1897. And yes, it's interesting to tell that particular story. So the people commissioned him to basically paint a picture of Black people being downtrodden and so forth, so that they could, do that. But he used the charts and the data, and he had to, go door to door and talk to people to gather this particular data. It's one of the sort of linchpins of sociology to be able to do that sort of data gathering. And just going back to this particular work, they use many different sources of data. They used census data. They used all kinds of data that they could pull together to do that. So yes. So I guess one lesson there is gathering the data, working with the data is as important as how do you show it.
Because now we're lucky. We have Google Sheets, we have Excel, we can just type in stuff, we can throw some stuff in there, Macaru, whatever we want, right? We can come up with something. But imagine going door to door, trying to collect this information to generate it to an audience who might not even want to consume it. Like, it's a grueling effort to go through that whole process.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right, on to the next question. Thinking about modern tools, modern techniques, and we all are practitioners in our craft. We all work on data visualization and create stories. But based on the DuBois challenge, are there any techniques that you learned from the challenge that you're currently using in any of your current projects?
I can take a shot at that. I mean, I'll share screens real quick if I can. Because it's actually the one that's behind Anthony now. This fan chart, when I did it, this was probably one of those types of charts where it was like, even after the fact, I'm like, this is kind of a useful way to show data. Like, like I never would have built something like this on my own. And I've actually now used this exact kind of style when it comes to like, I don't know what the official name is, whether it's a split fan chart, split radial chart.
I call it a fan chart.
Fan chart, yeah. I know it has a technical term, but yeah, I mean, just the idea to be able to take a chart and kind of split it this way and then show two sides, of kind of the same data and the impact of how one side versus the other. Yeah, this was an example where in this particular, I guess challenge, number 7, and I think this was last year's. I actually did use this exact same chart in a real dashboard, different data, obviously, but a different context, but still, I was inspired just by the idea of, again, it's not a standard visualization, but to me, I found it effective, in exactly the point I was trying to make, both in this and the one I did in my personal life. But I'll stop sharing. Thanks.
So yeah, I'll echo that again. As I said before, I like this chart so much. I built tools to actually do bespoke it, so you can throw it some CSVs and it will generate them for you. They're really good. For example, if you have a few items against 2 populations, that's the sort of sweet spot for that. The other one that has sort of affected my work is, again, that the notion of intentionality, but also the color scheme. They use a particular color scheme for that. I tend to see if I could use that in some of the visuals that I do as well.
And I'll answer that. I'll piggyback off that. I think current day is color and how you leverage colors to get a point across. It's something that I definitely draw from and try and get inspiration from as well when I'm trying to put something out.
I'll go next. I guess those are really cool points, I'd say. In my own experience, I found that I've built out multiple dashboard repositories since then. And some of the functionality that I utilized in the DuBois gallery, I've been able to leverage at work in kind of giving that ease of navigation and easy access to, a repository or dashboards for people. So it's not complicated functionality, but I'd say it's relatively useful.
All right, so we're going to end on this. I'm actually going to throw a little loophole in here because Robin just asked a really great question in Q&A. So I'm going to ask this out loud. So she asked, I want to know, what do each of you hope to come out of this challenge? If you had one wish out of this challenge, what would it be?
If I had one wish.
I'll never hear Chimney sing Ray J again.
So I'll start. So for me, my wish is that the participation widens, and that I love to see what people do with it. So my only wish is to just, bask in the excellence of other people doing this.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback, to be inspired by what everyone else does, because that's what helps me get better.
Yeah, I'd say engagement for sure is one of the major hopes. And from my perspective, I hope that people, take an interest in Tableau from this, right? Being able to see the transition from hand-drawn, artifacts that DuBois created like a long time ago, and then seeing some of the stuff in Tableau. I hope that makes them kind of ask, what is this Tableau tool? Like, let me check this out, So that's my side.
And I'll answer it. I think biggest piece is exposure, and it's more so exposure to W. Du Bois for sure, and continuing his legacy.
Yeah.
And making sure that he gets the credit for the craft of how great he was, and then leveraging modern day tools. So hopefully we make an impact or spark an idea to where we can leverage modern day data sets or generate modern data sets to tell the existing stories that are still happening to this day. And then also as well, right, W. Du Bois, prominent Black man, very much of a leader, like articulate the things that he has done in this society, 1900, 2024, still leveraging his stuff. So just really just highlighting what type of leader he was and the type of vision that he had. Those are a couple of things that I really want to come out of this challenge.
Yeah. One more thing to add here, just for people to actually don't just produce charts and visuals, right? Like look at the data and really just connect with it and see what's being shown. And hopefully just you get to take away something and learn something about the experiences of the people that you're visualizing.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for today for joining. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Chimdi. Thank you, Rashid. Thank you, Allen, and your internet issues. Just joking, man. Thank you so much for being on today. Thank you, everybody. We really, really appreciate it. This will be recorded and will be posted out there. We'll have links posted everywhere. If you have any questions about GitHub, if you have questions about how to access the information, about historical challenges, all the above, we're all on LinkedIn. I think our link's on here. We'll post this, blast this up. But reach out to us. We're all personable. As you can tell, we like to joke and laugh. Reach out to us. We want to make sure that this is growing and doing what it needs to do. But thank you all so much for joining today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.